Welcome back to Dusting History. Today I'm going to do something slightly different. I have this wonderful airship from the World's Fair in St. Louis from 1904. And what I'm going to do is look at the fidelity of this image and see if I can improve it using a variety of different techniques to see if any one of these sharpening tools that are out there is any better than any of the others. So firstly, I'll just crop it down. And using the clone tool, I'll just roughly paint out the sky. It's pretty flat. There's not going to be a huge amount of information there to retain. This was from an old stereograph, a twin pair of stereo images. And I think it's a particularly beautiful looking picture. So here I'm adding a couple of adjustment layers. I'm trying to expose for the people on the ground down the bottom and not really worrying about the airship or the sky above it. I'm going to put a vignette on that, but I'm trying to expose as best I can for the people in the dark suits down the bottom. And I'll put another one in here, and that one I'm going to use just to darken down the edge of frame there with a bit more contrast. You can see it's quite blown out. A lot of old photos have that, where there's like lots of light will leak around the edge of frame. So once I've painted a bit of a mask, I can go in and just check the balance of those layers. A little bit of an exposure tweak with an exposure layer. Okay, so I select all those layers and duplicate them by dragging them down and then flattening them down to a single image, because I want to start playing with sharpening and just exploring different tools for that. So first up, I'm going to go and double the size of the picture because it's only quite a low resolution image. And the first tool I'll try is Remini, which is an online web-based AI enhancing tool. And you can see it's brought a lot of sharpness to the image after it's processed the picture. So I'll download that picture and we'll have a look at it in Photoshop. Now here you can see it's really sharp, but it pretty much blown away a lot of the detail. It's gotten quite graphic, and you can see on the machinery there, although it's brought a lot of sharpness to it, it's really made it almost illustrative in the way it's sharpened up the image, and we've lost a lot of detail. I do like what it's done with these fine wires and the trees over the top of the fence at the background there. And even the structure of that hanger is quite good too. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate the original image again. And I'm going to use Photoshop's internal neural networks. So going to photo restoration on the neural network, you can see it's done a pretty good job of bringing a level of sharpness to the image without really overdoing it. as I toggle on and off, it's also done a pretty good job of flattening out the grain of the image as well. So I've duplicated the layer again and gone into Topaz Photo AI, and I've run the system there, been a little careful with the amount of grain I've allowed to, or the amount of sharpening I've allowed it to do, and it's done a great job. It does introduce a fair bit of buzzy kind of noise, almost like a stipple, but it also does a pretty good job of sharpening the image. And you can see if I toggle between the 4 of these, from the original through Topaz, through the neural networks and into Remini, you get really different results. So I've dragged the neural networks layer below all the others because I think I'll probably not lean on that so heavily. I'll probably use the Topaz cleanup as my primary. And I've put a mask on the Remini one, a black mask, and you can just see here with a soft white brush, I'm just going to paint a few areas of that layer back, because I did, like I said, I did like those sort of sharper wires and things through here, and I like the trees. I like a few things. I'm being selective with where I let that sharpening tool be visible in my final piece. And you can see here, I think I'm holding shift and clicking on the layer, and it just toggles the mask on and off, so you can just quickly see what you have and what little bits you might want to restore back through. Generally speaking, there's not that much of the Remini one that I really want to keep. Now I'm duplicating that layer again, and I'm going to mask that out to black again, and you can see I've set the opacity down really low because I just want some of that Remini sharpness on the hanger to come through, but only really subtly, so I'm being very careful with that. It's around 20% opacity. Okay, so select all those layers, duplicate them, right click, merge layers. I'm going to work on that composite image up the top as my hero image now. I'm going to keep the others there underneath, but this way I can just go in with a remove tool and just work my way around the image, removing all the dots and spots and little blemishes and try to even up the image. And there's a ton of them in it. There's a lot of little spots there. I've actually sped this footage up 1,000 times to save you the boredom. And so I think now when I toggle on and off between the original and the cleanup, you can see how much has been removed from those spots and dots, and also just the general sharpness of the image and the amount of information that seems to be there now that was simply blurry and dotty before. It's amazing how much more you see in an image once all the spots and blemishes have been removed. And really, it's what the photographer would have hoped the image looked like, I'm sure. Okay, so that's that done. Now onto colour. The first thing I'm going to show you is what colourise does under the neural filters in Photoshop. Now obviously a blimp in a hangar from 1910 is a bit of an abstract image for it to work on, but the colour choices it's made have been quite interesting. As you can see here, I'm making sure to output it on a separate layer as a colour only layer, and that's it there. Orange, it's not great. The people here are mostly either big patches of green or grey. The AI hasn't done a great job of working out what's a human, what's grass, what's a wall. So largely that can be ignored. Now, this next image was a colour palette generated by Vance AI, which is another online tool for generating colour images. And as you can see, it hasn't done a great job either. There's colour bleed, there's funky reds, there's all sorts of different tones. And if you go to normal mode rather than colour mode, this is also what it did to sharpen the image, which has become quite a work of art really, but not very useful really. So both Vance AI and the neural network's color I'm going to delete. Now also here you can see I've got a folder of palettes from Palette FM, which is another online tool for coloring images. And as you can see, they're all wildly different, and they are based on a text-based system. They come with a bunch of canned results, some of which are here. But you can also type your own text prompt. Some of these are wildly inaccurate, but I really like the way it scatters color. I like the way it has a really interesting palette. And so what I'm going to do is just look at the different pros and cons of each of those different layers, delete a few, keep a few. I like that brown on the nose cone of the ship. I like some of the rusty tones on the blades on the propellers. I like the way it puts blue in the shadows. It's really quite a sensitive tool. I'm also going to generate a new layer up the top that I'm going to set to color that I can paint my own variations into later. So walking through them, I'm just going to work out the ones I think I can pretty comfortably delete, like those two, and that one. Leaving just these two, which I think will form the basis for my colouring. So I'm going to mask out that top one. I like parts of it, but not all of it. I'm mostly interested in the layer on the bottom. So again, setting a mask, setting it to black, and then with a white brush painting, I can paint through to the top palette all the little elements. I think it got better than the bottom colour. Predominantly the colour of that wall, I really like the colour of that wall. Also underneath the craft here, I like the colours that the bottom layer suggested rather than what the top layer had, which was far more yellow. So you can see I keep toggling the mask on and off using the shift key just to sort of see what areas I want to reintroduce. So now moving on to the top layer that you can see I've set to colour, I'm going to pick a grey. Grey on a warm image can look really cool, like a really cool, almost a blue tone. And I'm just going to knock some of the warmth or the blue out of that smoke. I really like to pick that out as a fire burning and not just some kind of interesting cloud. So sort of just taking some of the blue out and trying to be a little scattergun with it so that parts of the blue sky shine through. You can see the effect that's had. And I'm going to paint a little bit more blue into that sky. It's mostly white, but it'll pick up a tiny bit of that blue colour. And also I like to scatter a little of that same colour, that same blue into the shadows, make sure that feels nice and like indirect bounce from the sky dome. Alright, so I've been painting into the people for a little bit, and here I'm just going to, you can see here when I toggle on and off, I've added some flesh tone in their faces, which really makes them pop out of that background quite a lot. And just picking out the hands and faces, and also just sort of painting the same colour onto their outfits so that they don't sort of blend into the grass as they did before. One of the last things I like to do is make a new layer and then set its colour to 50% grey, which you can see there. I'm going to type in 50 right there, or at least slide it to 50. So that's a mid-tone. And fill the background with that colour. And now if I set that to overlay mode, it does nothing to the image, because overlay, the function of an overlay mode is to make anything black multiply into the image, which I eventually get right here. See, so that's multiplying the darks down. And if I flip it into white and paintbrush with some of that, it screens, or it additively adds white. So the grey is transparent, and then black and white, depending on how strong they are, become more or less visible, either as a multiplier or a screen. And the reason I do that is now I can go up to the filter and add some noise, and I'm going to add a Gaussian noise, a monochromatic noise, and I can set that to a certain amount. Hang on, there you go. And what that's done is added a stipply noise to the image. And why I do that is because some of the images now got 0 grain, some has a lot, some has, you know, all sorts of different directional lines through it, things, bits and pieces. And what it does is really unifies the image and makes it, you can see that I'm showing a bit that had a little bit of grain on the bottom of the fin and not much on the top. And at least what this does is it gives it a bit more of a cohesive single image kind of look. And there you have it, the original 1/2 of a stereograph with dark figures at the base and a lot of dirt. And hopefully a more pleasing image. A little fanciful in colour perhaps, but striking nonetheless. So thanks very much for joining me this time. Hope you learned something, and we'll see you next time.